In this video, we're going to look at the most common questions that are asked in Wendy's interviews, and I'm going to help you structure some great answers that are going to get Wendy's really interested in hiring you. So let's start with a question that comes up in basically every single Wendy's interview, and is really probably the most important question in deciding whether or not you're going to be hired by Wendy's. So the first thing you've got to make sure you do to successfully answer the question around what shifts you can do is to make sure that you do not volunteer any information about times you can't do. So the structure that you're going to follow is you're going to show that you're going to be there when they need people. You're going to show that you've got a can-do attitude, and you're going to show that you're flexible. And by showing those three things, you're going to show that you're committed to the job. The way that people mess up this question and blow up their Wendy's interview is they immediately go in to the question by listing all of the times that they can't work, and then ending by saying, but I can work any other time. So you're structuring the answer in the wrong way. The way to be successful is to talk endlessly about what you can do and don't bring up any time you can't do. They have to ask you about those specific times you can't do. You're volunteering only the times that you can do. If you're questioned on times that you can't do, the trick is to talk about preferences and show some flexibility and some give and take rather than just saying no to it. There are, however, some other things that you can do to make your answer even stronger. And there's certain things that Wendy's really love to hear. They like to hear people that can work on weekends. If you're able to work on holidays, so you don't mind being in on various public holidays, that's great. If you can work at short notice, if you have the capacity to work over the school breaks, that's great. If you can't, just don't bring it up. They do need people to work evenings and also at opening times. So within the day, they're the two times which is slightly more difficult to staff. So if you can list as many of those as possible and talk about all of the times that you can do, you will score highly on this question and will get the manager interested in hiring you. Because you don't want to be creating problems for the company. You want to be offering them solutions to their staffing problems. And that gets hiring managers and managers of stores very interested in taking you on. All right, for the second question, you need to show the knowledge that you have about Wendy's. You should never, ever go to any interview without doing thorough research on the company. And the way that you work out how to structure your answer is you start by mentioning things that are very obvious, things that everyone would know about the company. So you should know that Wendy's is very famous for having square burgers and that they are very big on fresh food, and they have a signature drink called the Frosty. So there are some obvious things that everyone realistically within the United States, for example, would know about Wendy's. Then you have to go one step further and show that you've done some research. And then to really impress them and stand out, you have to make sure you show some specialist knowledge. And you're not only preparing for this specific question, because it's possible it doesn't come up. It often comes up, but doesn't always. If it doesn't come up, preparing for this question is a really great way to prepare for your interview, because you can start dropping in all of these facts as appropriate and show off that knowledge, and it will come across really positively. So you should be aware that the majority of Wendy's locations are franchised. So less than 5% roughly of Wendy's are actually owned by the Wendy company. The vast majority of them are owned by independent, either small businesses or chains of Wendy stores that are owned by companies completely separate to the actual Wendy's company. You should, of course, know that it was founded by Dave Thomas and it is named after his daughter. The most famous tagline for the company is "Where's the beef?" Though that's not the current tagline for the company, but it's the one that people tend to know about. And you should be able to mention that they were founded in 1969 and that they have expanded to lots and lots of different countries across the world. My other top tip for this question is to read the Wendy Company's Form 10K. If you just Google that, you will get the annual report for the company, and it will have absolutely amazingly detailed information. And by reading that, you're going to have so much more knowledge than the vast majority of people that ever go for a job there. So prepare for this question, because you will have lots of opportunities to show off your knowledge in the interview, and that helps you stand out massively. So let's look at question 3. How would you deal with an angry or upset customer at Wendy's? And unfortunately, this is something that's going to happen when you're working there, and managers want to be reassured that you're going to behave appropriately to this situation. So there's 3 things that I always recommend that you mention. You first start by reassuring them that you're going to stay calm at all times. You're not going to raise your voice. You're not going to shout. You're not going to be angry. You're not going to be aggressive. So reassure them that you're not going to do these things and emphasize that you're going to behave in a professional way. You are a representative of the Wendy's brand. When you're in uniform working in the store, you represent the company. And anything you do that's bad, that's, for example, caught on camera, is going to harm the company. And you're very aware of that. You're then going to talk about the fact that you're going to know Wendy's policies inside out. You're going to know what the appropriate response is to a customer complaint. For example, if a customer is demanding a refund, you're going to know the policy as to whether that can be given and who within the store is allowed to authorize that, for example. And you're going to stick to those policies. You don't have any discretion usually about whether you can choose to follow a policy or apply your own intuition to the situation. And then the last word that you absolutely must get into your answer to this question is the word de-escalate. That means calming the situation down, getting everything back under control. Your absolute focus in this situation is de-escalation. You don't want to make the customer any more angry than they already are. You're looking to keep a calm, friendly, great store environment that people are going to want to come to Wendy's. They don't want to come there with angry and upset customers. They want a positive experience, and you're there to help deliver that. So get these 3 ideas in and you will score really high on this question. It's a negative screening question. So they're really looking for not the people that answer it really well, but to screen out the people that get it wrong. So let's look at question 4. Why do you want to work at Wendy's? And if you haven't prepared for this question and it comes up and you give a bad answer, that's really going to hurt you in the interview. So you're going to make sure that you've really prepared for this. And so I'm going to give you lots of suggestions of things you should mention, what you shouldn't mention, and then some tips of some good ideas to talk about. So the first thing is you should think about, why do you want to work for Wendy's instead of another brand? What do you like about Wendy's that makes it stand out above all of the others? Then you're going to talk about, why do you actually want to work in fast food? Specifically, why have you thought about this as a career? You can talk about future opportunities. Do you want to, in 5 years, for example, to be an assistant manager or looking to be a restaurant manager? And the other thing that's really great to mention as a long-term goal that really quite gets them interested is, would you consider owning a Wendy's? Would you consider taking on a franchise in 10 years' time? Because that is something they would really like to hear. And the most important thing to be successful is you've got to show lots of enthusiasm. You've got to be enthusiastic about the company, because they would rather employ someone who's got some enthusiasm rather than someone who's just not that bothered about it. Some things you definitely don't mention, though a lot of people do mention them, is they say that Wendy's is nearby. So they talk about how convenient it would be to work there. Wendy's don't care about that. They talk about, they need a job to get some money. Again, Wendy's doesn't care about your bank account. They care more about their bank account. If you give any indication that you're just going to be there for a short term, for example, you're doing it until you start college, for example, they don't want to hear that. Because the second you say that, the manager's going, right, we're going to give you a job. You're going to leave in a few months, and we're going to have to spend all this money advertising again and do a whole another round of interviews, which is a waste of my time. I'd rather just employ someone who's going to stick around for a while. So basically, you want to avoid anything that you would not want to hear if you were the business owner. So imagine you own Wendy's. What would you want to hear? And so there are things on that list, and some other things that you may want to talk about is, you love working with customers. If you're going to be someone who is at the front of the company, interacting on a daily basis with customers, that has to be something you want to do. You could talk about your love for food. And if you really like the Wendy's brand, talk about what we call brand affinity. So your love of the brand. And that's something they really like to hear. So get all these ideas in and you will have prepared a really great answer. So let's move on to question 5. So they're often interested to know your strengths and weaknesses. It's a standard interview question, but often very badly answered. So you have to start with a notable strength. So something that's actually important. Some good examples here might be reliability, very important in fast food. And you might also consider being really great at customer service. You'll have something that backs it up, for example, a qualification or a reference. So that's a way of saying, it's not just me that thinks I have this strength, someone else agrees with me. And most importantly, your strength needs to be extremely relevant to Wendy's business. And the way that you can structure your answer is to say, a key strength that I have is, and then say what your strength is. I can evidence this by, show some evidence, for example, a reference or a qualification. and then do some work for them by explaining how your strength is going to help Wendy's. So while at Wendy's, this strength will, for example, if you're talking about reliability, that will help the smooth running of Wendy's, because Wendy's really needs people that are there on time so that they can be fully staffed and deliver great customer service. So we're going to move on now and look at weaknesses, which is the question that can blow up the interview. So you need to be very careful on how you answer this question. And after we've been through this, I'm going to give you some questions that you should be asking them as a bonus. So on the weakness, you have to make sure that what you say is actually a real weakness, because the way people screw this up is they give a fake weakness, which just comes across very negatively. So things like, I really hate that I insist on everything being perfect. So the idea of being a perfectionist, that is not a real weakness. It's sort of trying to make something that's kind of a strength in some ways, but is a slight weakness in some ways. It's just a terrible answer. Then you want to talk about what you're actually doing to fix it. So it's not just the case of you've got a weakness that you're just going to have forever. You're actually going to do something about it. But most importantly, make sure it is something that Wendy's really doesn't care about. If it's something that's important to the job, saying that as your weakness is going to really cut your chance of getting the job. So if you were to say something like, I am told I have offensive body odor, well, that's going to put them right off hiring you, because that's not going to deliver great customer service. And so the way that I would structure an answer is say that a weakness I'm aware of is, say your weakness, and then say I'm actively working to overcome this by, and talk about all the things that you're doing. Are you taking a course? Are you looking to get some mentoring, get some support in overcoming that? And what is your plan? Is it going to go away in a year, for example? Some ideas you could talk about are delegation if you're not going for a management role, because you can kind of spin the story that by the time you move up a level, you'll have learned that skill. So if you're just starting out on the tills, you don't really need to be able to delegate, because that's not part of your job. Spelling, you're not likely to be writing. Maths, the till will do all the maths for you. Or only speaking one language is the vast majority of people. So as long as you're not in an area that is heavily bilingual or has got lots of diversity, then saying you only speak one language isn't going to be a negative, and probably the vast majority of all the other people in for the job only speak one language, so it's not going to be of much significance. And you can say very easily that you would like to learn another language in future. And so if you stick to the methods that I've given you on this slide, you'll survive the biggest weakness question. So let's finish with a bonus on some great questions to ask. So definitely ask them about the next steps in Wendy's hiring process. You can ask them also about if there's opportunity for feedback. You can ask them what a new hire should do to be really prepared. That shows some eagerness, and it shows you actually care about starting really positively and you take your job seriously. Ask about the team you're going to be working with, because that's a really great way of you getting some insight into the role, because maybe you don't want to accept the offer. Maybe you got a better offer somewhere else. And so if you don't hear great things about the team, maybe this isn't the best place for you. A tricky question to ask, which is quite clever if you're very careful about how you ask it, is to ask them to describe the perfect Wendy's employee. Let the manager tell you what they are looking for in a perfect employee, and then gently remind them of the things that mean that you match up with their vision of the perfect employee. And the last thing is, you have to make up one question on the day. It has to be based on something that's been discussed in the interview. So just when you're going through the interview, be listening carefully and just think up a question and then ask that at the end. So hopefully this video has been very helpful to you. Best of luck in your Wendy's interview, and thank you very much for watching.